Heritage Corridor that we're talking
Yes.
about. That is an exciting idea. You want to share that?
It is. The National Heritage Area of the Honolulu Capital Cultural District is an idea that has really been percolating for the last couple of years. There's been a coalition of preservation partners that have been evaluating and doing some studies and some feasibility analysis. The original coordination for that was actually started by the legislature by appointing a special group to be in charge of that, and then it was also endorsed by the City and County of Honolulu. And it has now come to fruition. There's been national legislation that's been introduced by Senator Inouye to designate the National Heritage Area that is essentially the Ahupua'a of Nu'uanu, so from the Pali to the ocean. A National Heritage Area is not a zoning or regulatory overlay, so that's one thing people should be aware of. It doesn't change any of their property rights or any of the processes that they need to go through if they happen to lie within that boundary. Instead, it's a way to think about an area with the different layers of history and to tell some of the themes and the stories that relate to that area. So in this area, of course, there's the monarchy and Washington Place and Iolani Palace and the history of the kingdom. There's also the story of Honolulu becoming a world capital, you know, the harbor, Chinatown, different commerce coming in, the whaling era, and has a crossroads of trade between the East and the West. So there are several different stories and themes that can be told through the historic sites that are here today that we enjoy and appreciate. So the National Heritage Area brings together interpretation efforts, different federal monies that are available for the preservation and marketing of these sites. So it ties directly not only to resource protection, but to heritage tourism. How do we tell Hawaii's story? And this is one way to help do that.
Oh, well, it's just beautiful here. For those of you who haven't been to downtown Honolulu and around the state capitol, it's pretty amazing. I just come here, I get just charged when I come into this area. It's so beautiful, and the history, you just feel it.
It's stunning in its physical setting and in the architecture and of course the climate, but on top of that there's just this feeling that you're part of something and part of a long history of something. Right. So it's a little counterintuitive sometimes, but preservation is not really about the past, it's really about the future. And it's recognizing and appreciating how we got to where we are and helping to lay that foundation for where are we going next. So it's very exciting in that way. So,
you know, the name of this is Now What? So I have to ask you, well, now what?
Now what?
Now what for the historic preservation greater community? I mean, obviously, Historic Preservation Awareness Day, I mean, there's a side benefit of having that day here at the state capitol, and that is bringing 40 or 50 organizations and helping them network and connect and meet each other. But, you know, the greater historic preservation community, I mean, some of them are just living on a thin thread because they're nonprofits, they're volunteers. Talk a little bit about, you know, what can the greater community do, I mean, to support the efforts, because it's through their kind of community, sense of community, and they volunteer and give them themselves is why we have some of these great places to go. So comment.
And that's a great call to action, I think, that the places we appreciate today, if we're not diligent and if we aren't paying attention and if we aren't deliberate about this, they may not be here. And I think it's easy to take them for granted sometimes. And I don't like the kind of alarmist, oh, act now or this too will be lost, but sometimes act now or this too will be lost. And I think people need to be very, number one, appreciative. They need to celebrate the places they love. Go to those museums. Go shopping in downtown Hilo. Appreciate tea at the Moana Surf Rider. You know, be sure to go out there, appreciate the places, enjoy them, and don't just kind of forget that they're there. And even if it's something like a walking tour in Manoa or going on your favorite Sunday drive and appreciating the scenic road to Hana or to Hanalei or the Kaiwi Coast, you know, those are all historic sites and historic places, and we need to appreciate them and know that they're there. So that's not necessarily expensive, and certainly something that can be done in good times, bad times, with friends, alone. It should be part of our everyday experience. So I would say that's number one. Number two is there are a lot of small organizations. They're either all volunteer or they're nonprofits that are working on a tight budget, and support them. Give them volunteer hours. With our own membership at Historic Hawaii Foundation, we were of course worried, like everyone else, that we would see a drop-off in support given the economic times. So far, our numbers are still rising. Our members are still being loyal. We have new members joining all the time. They may not be able to give as much as they did in the past, but they're still supporting at the level that they're comfortable and that they're able. And that's very encouraging to me, because it says to me, number one, they still believe in this, and number two, when times get better, they'll still be around. So I would encourage people to give what they can. Is it time? Is it, if it's a smaller check, if it's a larger check, of course, that's always nice too, but to continue to support the things that they care about. And the third thing I would say, as far as a call to action, is get involved. There's opportunities to contact elected officials to say, there's this issue that's being considered. Please keep in mind the impact this will have on our heritage and our legacy. Please don't just toss the baby out with the bathwater, which happens sometimes with legislation that can be perhaps overly broad or not necessarily taking into account those activities. And certainly at both the state, the county, and the federal level, there are opportunities to get involved.
Well, thank you. I know, having been involved in the Historic Preservation Awareness Day and meeting some of the exhibitors, I know that with the rising costs of energy, one of the things that they have said to me is their operating costs have skyrocketed so much that what little fees or entry fees or whatever fundraising they've done just doesn't seem to be cutting it. And I remember that you and I talked last year about, is there a possibility, of bringing these organizations together and really talking it through in terms of how can they partner to address the kind of that bigger issue of how to cover our operating costs. I don't have any thoughts on that. I mean, I think you're doing a roundtable.
We have done an annual roundtable the last couple of years to bring some of these partners together and say, what is it that we see in terms of big picture trends and issues in preservation, but also where can we support each other? What are the opportunities for working together, finding those points where we can reinforce the efforts and help each other. That's been more on a mission level and a programmatic level than on a day-to-day operations level. But certainly challenging times call for creative solutions. And I know the Hawaii Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations, the Hawaii Community Foundation, other organizations that are very involved with nonprofits have continued to advocate for that level of dialogue and that level of cooperation between the organizations. And I think it's exactly the way we need to be going.
Okay. Well, we have a few minutes left. I thought I would make it a little more personal. What is your favorite place, let's say on the island of Oahu? What's your favorite place?
There are a lot, so this is a hard question. But I'm going to say the intersection, the corner of Merchant Street and Bethel Street in downtown Honolulu. And if you stand on that intersection, there's the Yokohama Specie Bank building on one corner. There's the Kamehameha V original post office on one corner. There's a commercial building on the third corner. And there's the old Honolulu police station, which is now being used by the Real Property Tax Division on the fourth corner. So it's 4 historic buildings, but each of those buildings is very, very different. They span 80 years of history. We've got civic buildings, we have commercial buildings, we have buildings that have been adaptively reused to a new use than the one that was originally contemplated. Over 80 years of history, now of course we think, oh, they're all historic, but they were all new at different points, and yet they have this synergy and this relationship to each other that is very compatible. So to me, it's also an example of how you can do new construction adjacent to historic construction and still have it add to a place and have it be compatible and enjoyable. So just sitting there, and there's a view to the harbor, and there's a view Mauka, and it's just a lovely location. And there's always people there. There's always active. It just feels like a thriving commercial area.
And you can almost go back in time.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Wow, that is really great. Is there any efforts for oratory, storytelling, people telling their story?
You know, there are different organizations doing that. I know in Kauai, the Kauai Historical Society did a series on backyard music, and they turned it into a documentary. So they brought together people to tell about getting together and playing backyard Hawaiian music. And they captured that on tape. It's available through the Kauai Historical Society. There's a oral history center at the University of Hawaii, and they will go out and capture people's on tape, telling stories, their memories. So there's a variety of kind of small efforts that will occasionally turn into something larger.
If someone has a story, they have a great-grandfather, grandmother that has a great story, is there a way to get that told?
You know, the Hawaiian Historical Society is probably the best bet. Okay. They're really charged, I think, more with the documents and archival protection, but they would probably have some good leads on oral histories as well. Okay.
Well, I have to tell you, in closing, I think, Kiersten, you're an amazing source of information, an amazing person, and your passion for this is it's just there. And I'm really glad to meet you and know you, and really I'm connected with your passion on this subject. But it's really great, and I think we should close and tell people they can get a hold of the Historic Hawaii Foundation, and you're a resource for them, and you can guide them.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing this passion. It's definitely a calling, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Our website is historichawaii.org, and our phone number is 808-523-2900. We have a Preservation Resource Center that includes technical assistance. If people have questions about historic resources and ways to help steward them and take care of them, that's a great resource. And there's a lot on the website as well.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll wrap up.
All right.
And thank you for being with us. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thanks.